All right. That was Jacqueline Narinda. Thank you so much for that report. And today, like I said, we want to take an in-depth look at the effect of the impact of this budget that has been passed, the 34 trillion budget that has been passed to the average Ugandan, and of course to the citizens of Uganda as a country. And of course today on our show we are very humbled to host Mr. Jeff. I'm still struggling to pronounce the other name, but welcome to the show, Mr. Jeff Wadulo.
Thank you so much, Tush. I'm happy to be on Smart 24 TV, and thank you for hosting me.
You're welcome, sir. Now, I understand you are the Parliamentary Liaison Officer of CSBAG, which is the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. I think I've mentioned it right.
That's correct.
And of course, we keep hearing some of these stakeholders. They have very interesting names, but the average Ugandan would wish to know, what exactly is CSBAG?
Thank you so much, Tush. CSBAG is a non-government organization, a group of about 100 individuals and organizations that came together to monitor government budgets, to be able to see that the ordinary person, especially the vulnerable, marginalized women and youth and the elderly, that they benefit from the allocations of the national budget, but not just that, but make sure that their interests are taken care of, not just at the national, but also at the sub-national level. So increasingly our work engages duty bearers at national level with the ministries, departments and agencies, but also with Parliament of Uganda, which is a key role that I play as a liaison officer, to make sure that civil society interests and those of Parliament are in sync, but more also to make sure that the budgets that are passed are in line with the aspirations of the ordinary citizen.
Wow. Yeah. Interesting. Thank you so much for that brief preamble about what you do. Now, Jeff, I want us to dig into this very briefly. One, we understand that the 34 trillion budget has been passed, and the framework process itself did attract a lot of attention as Ugandans were wondering what had been cut, which sector had been undercut, which sector had been increased, so to say. Now, who won and who lost, in your opinion?
It is too early to say that, because what was passed actually is the budget framework paper, which is in ordinary language a draft.
Yes.
These are draft proposals from the different sectors as how they intend to allocate the money finally. We still have another process which is called the ministerial policy statements somewhere in March, which have to be passed by about 1st of April. That would be like the final draft of the budget.
Okay.
For now, there's still room for improvement. But still, from your question, there's still worry that there are a lot of sectors that are losing out in this year. From that 34.3 trillion, by the way, increased from about 32.7 from last financial year. That's about 1.6 trillion increased in the budget. But how much of that actually is going to key social sectors? That's a question you and me have to interrogate.
Yes.
But you could see that for the last 3 financial years, the roads, works and transport sector has always taken the lion's share of the budget. This financial year, it is at 5.3 trillion, up from 4.7 last financial year. For the last 3 financial years, or even more.
Yes.
That tells you that government is speaking through this to try and make sure that it invests in huge infrastructure projects. The roads, you've seen most of the roads that are especially linking the towns.
Yes.
Those, a number of them are tarmacked, which is a good thing.
Yes.
But the challenge is on the roads that actually link to those that actually impact the ordinary person. The feeder roads are still in a very bad shape.
Yes.
We'll talk about that later.
Yes.
The other thing, which is called the sector, but which shouldn't, because it is actually interest payments. They're taking number 2.
Okay.
Of our budget. And increasingly, by the way, they are taking more away from investment in the social sectors.
Yes.
So for this financial year, we have 2.9 trillion, up from 2.5 last financial year. That means the interest we're paying on our debt, without the principal, is increasing. And that means it's a reflection of our borrowing, which has gone high.
Yes.
About 41% of GDP,
yes,
which is below 50. You could say it is still sustainable, but worrying because it is on an increasing rate. And we're also borrowing what we call non-concessional loans.
Yes.
Loans that you have to pay back quickly from commercial banks rather than these international finance institutions like the World Bank and the African Development Bank.
Yes.
There are a few loans from there, but more is coming from things like Exim China Bank, which,
yes,
which makes it very difficult for the country, because in a situation where you have an increasing external debt, you are collecting less money locally. I think you saw what was happening with the URA.
yes,
They had a shortfall of about 555 billion. Actually, the budget committee recommends that there has to be an audit, a forensic audit,
into your
on why year-in-year out they are increasingly shooting below their targets.
yes,
Are there leakages? Is more money leaking after collection, or are we not, as Ugandans, paying enough money in terms of taxes compared to our GDP? By the way, the lowest in the region.
yes,
Even below the average sub-Saharan mark, because I think we have stagnated at around 13.9, almost 14.
yes,
The sub-Saharan average is about 15.6. So that tells you, you can even imagine behind countries that are even much poorer, like Burundi.
Yes.
Burundi is collecting more tax compared to GDP than Uganda.
Yes.
So that tells you we need to do a lot more.
yes,
The other sectors which could have, gained is agriculture. Agriculture is up from 892 billion
Yes.
last financial year to 919.
oh wow,
But even when there has been an increase, it is still below the Maputo and Malabo. Remember, 10%. We've never even hit 6%. What does that tell you? But also, we've discovered that some money, say for NADS, some of that budget has been cut.
yes,
And some of that money actually has been taken to State House. We shall talk about that.
yes,
Public administration has gone up.
okay,
And that's worrisome.
yes,
At the expense of the other social sectors, as you see. Public administration from 624 billion
yes,
to 746.
okay,
You'll see, by the way, that some of these cuts are even up to about 40% for some of the social sectors when you see. And others have also gone up by about 20% and so on. So you see a change away. You look at the structure of this budget. Increasing debt,
yes,
decreasing revenue collection, increasing domestic borrowing, increasing interest payments, reducing allocations to the social sectors, as I'm here to show you.
yes,
How do you see, even if you just brought it down to a microcosm of a small household budget, what does that tell you of an ordinary citizen? How much money is going to, especially social sectors that impact directly on human development? Let's look at health.
yes,
Health has gone down.
health has gone down,
2.3 trillion last financial year
yes,
to 2.2. You know, there's a difference there. of about 1.37%.
Yes.
We have education. Education is number 3 in our sector allocations.
Yes.
2.7 trillion. Last financial year, it has gone down to 2.6 trillion. Another very interesting sector, Tush.
Yes.
Which, by the way, if it got enough money, it would have a very huge impact on all other sectors.
Okay.
And that is the water and environment sector.
All right.
Do you know how much? From 1.2 trillion last financial year to 764 billion.
That's a huge
cut by about 39%.
That is a huge cut.
Huge cut. Somebody will tell you perhaps that there are some projects that could have been completed, but I'm yet to see. Actually, what I've seen as a parliamentary liaison officer is a lot of loans being contracted in Parliament.
Yes.
To have urban water and rural water extension.
Yes.
But I've not yet seen these loans perform yet. But a cut of about 40%, the role of water in our lives.
Yes.
In Sri Lanka and other economies where they have emphasized access to clean water, it cuts the disease burden by about 70%.
Yes.
Things like cholera, things like typhoid, things like the communicable diseases.
Yes.
Are all because of lack of access to water.
And most of them are transmitted through unsafe water. Actually.
Yes. But see, you're cutting the health budget.
Yes.
You're also cutting the water budget. But we also know that diseases are majorly created in homes and treated in hospitals.
Yes.
So if you had more money, for example, in the water and sanitation and environment sector, you would actually need less money in health.
Yes.
Because most of those diseases
would be avoided, prevented.
You will be now concentrating on perhaps the now growing, the non-communicable diseases.
Yes.
Like cancer, which has become a huge problem because of the counterfeit products, including medicine and food.
Yes.
So you would need more money for that. But you see that the health budget has been cut, the water budget has been cut.
Yes.
At the expense of works and transport and energy and mineral development.
Yes.
Because I think of the government policy to try and invest in huge infrastructure projects, which, by the way, their investment portfolio in terms of the rate of return is low.
Yes.
For every $1, we are only reaping 0.7%.
Yes.
So we're actually making losses at the moment. We have not yet reached a point of getting a positive return, and that means it might take longer, maybe even about 20 years,
okay,
to start reaping the benefits of these huge investments. Like power, for example, the ordinary Ugandan, how many actually Ugandans are on the grid?
Right.
How many can afford the electricity tariffs that we have? They're still very high.
Yes.
So while government is doing a good job to put money in these
areas,
huge sectors,
yes,
they need to balance their act. They need to equally put money in sectors that have a direct impact on the economic growth.
Yes.
Like tourism, for example, perpetually among the lowest, has only 32.4
is
billion.
That billion, million?
Billion. This is 32.4 billion, down from 32.6. Now, tourism, trade and industry, which has also seen, actually trade and industry has had a cut of about 35%, from 134 billion to 86. But when they tell you in the background to the budget,
yes,
and the budget strategy for the next medium-term expenditure framework,
yes,
they tell you this tourism, it tells you trade and industry, and agriculture are those drivers of the economy, where most people earn from, like from agriculture,
yes,
but also which earn, like tourism is earning huge, monies for the economy. And you don't need to invest a lot in tourism because you already have some of those tourist sites, including things that traditionally we think are not tourist attractions.
Yes.
Our own Lake Victoria. Unit is the second biggest freshwater lake in the world.
Yes.
Do you know that somebody can move all the way from the US or from China or wherever just to come and see the second biggest freshwater lake in the world?
Yes.
How much have we promoted tourist sites like these so that they attract
more revenue,
especially forex? But how much are we putting in as well? Because how are we reaping from where we are not sowing is the question.
Yes.
How do we expect this structure of the financing of the economy to take us to middle income by 2020, which is, by the way, this financial year is the last of the NDP2. Are we on the mark? I think we are far away because the investment portfolio that we needed to put in NDP2 compared to the last 3 financial years is, I think, about 10 trillion away from the investment mark to be able to raise our income, which is about per capita, I think, $770 US dollars, to the aspired level of about 1,050. That's about the lower rank of the middle income. So if you ask me, we still need to do a lot. I told you about 39 core projects.
Yes.
For this period of the NDP2.
Yes.
Only 2 projects are on schedule.
Yes. 7
are below schedule. 17 under preparation, and 28 not even yet started.
Not even yet started. Yet 2020 is just...
are we together, Tush?
Yes.
So, yeah, you could say, I mean, we could be brave about it and say, you know, in spite of the harassment of this economy, our economy is resilient. Our agriculture sector is resilient in spite of the onslaught of negligence by government not to invest in those areas like extension work. A household farmer will tell you they've taken years without seeing an extension worker.
Yes.
But even when they see the extension worker, they have to pay for those services. And yet, government is allocating money. So you wonder, how much of the agricultural sector growth is actually through government investment? That is a question for you and me to answer. Social development is another loser. Perennially, you can see 214 billion last financial year. It's only 162.
Okay, that's another huge
and
cut.
And a cut by about 24%.
A very huge cut indeed.
But social development is where every one of us belongs.
Yes.
The youth, the elderly, the women, everyone belongs to the social development sector. And so that means that there is monies that ought to go directly to impact on the lives of these people, like the YLP money. You have also heard, perhaps, that money was moved away from the Ministry of Gender and taken to State House. They cut out about 65 billion shillings. Then also cut money on NADS and created a budget line, a new budget line in State House called Youth Programs. And has 130 billion. Now, how that money is going to be managed is worrisome because we know how lack of scrutiny and confidentiality State House budgets are. But also in terms of equity, to what extent will State House distribute or manage this youth program so that everyone benefits within the country? It's worrisome. As I've told you already, trade and industry has had a cut also of about 35%. Now, it's a contradiction, Tush. That these sectors, even ICT
and
has also been cut by about 46%, from 149 to 79. Actually, I saw the other day the minister in charge of ICT, who is this Honorable the former minister of Kampala,
Frank Tumwebaze.
Frank Tumwebaze.
Yes.
He was saying government was misled to introduce the social media tax, and have actually made losses than gains as they anticipated. I don't know who was guiding government at that time, but we told them, remember the whole of last financial year?
Yes.
We kept telling government that the social media tax and the mobile money tax are not going to be equitable. They are regressive. They are targeting the most vulnerable section of society, people who have recently joined mobile money as a way of compensating for lack of a bank account.
Yes.
And then also ICT, which is a very good medium of innovation for young people.
Yes.
Now, if you also see now that these are getting less money, then there is I think we're being vindicated right now.
Yes.
Although, of course, we won on one that we were able to reduce the tax from 1% to about 0.5 on withdrawals only. So
Yes.
that was a win.
Yes.
So you could see that the structure of this budget is not the budget that will propel you to middle income in less than 1 year.
Yes.
Even if you were given 5 more years. You know why? Because the rate of economic growth is about 4.6%.
Yes.
We need about a growth of about 7%.
Okay.
And for the next about 3 years to be able to get to middle income.
Wow.
Otherwise, the way we are moving with this kind of structure of financing, we can't get
It
there.
is amazing the breakdown you've just given to us, and of course that's why I let you go on, because I feel the Ugandan needs to know about some of these things beyond reading them from newspapers and seeing when when it has been passed and it is impacting on them and they don't even know what is happening.
Right.
Lubega Eddie Jackie Adam interviewing twawulidde agamba sente zino muziweereza balina omuntu wa bulijjo temuweereza. That was his average Ugandan perspective, and he's a representative of over 70% of Ugandans. That's one. Two, your breakdown, as we go in for this break, I wish you could in less than a minute, let's take a very short break. We're going to be right back, and you will be able to engage us more, and that should happen any minute from now. So but as we much as I called for a break,
right.
I'm tempted to ask,
Right.
in your opinion, personal OCS bag, do you think this budget is realistic? You've already mentioned the breakdown, and I like it. You've mentioned the key sectors that have been undercut. But then more importantly, you've also mentioned the fact that we have an increase on the interest we are supposed to pay on debts, and it is the second biggest chunk of money that is being allotted to the from the budget.
Right.
But then still from this budget breakdown, it is indicated that 34% will actually be financed by more loans.
Right.
So is this realistic to you?
We were told when we were growing up that when you find yourself in a deep hole,
Yes.
stop digging.
Okay.
Are we stopping to dig? No, we're actually digging deeper. And it would make it hard for the rescuer who would have the longest ladder down the hole to get us out.
Yes.
So I'm thinking, first and foremost, this budget is not realistic. Number two, I think government needs to reduce on wastage. When they reduce on wastage, it is going to have a knock-on effect. That means more money will go into those sectors that are improving the quality of life of the person. Like I remember, you see, when you have a healthy population, you can have a productive population. And then you can have a population that you can tax more.
Yes.
And then that means gives you more local revenue. And then you again invest in those key sectors where they have more jobs. But government is not doing that. So you wonder whether they're expecting magic when they're doing the wrong things and expecting things to happen differently. This budget is actually very unrealistic. How do you increase public sector administration?
Yes.
How do you increase public sector management, public administration? Those are going up by 19%. That is public administration.
Yes.
Public sector management has gone up about 2.41%. Now, that at the expense of these other health, sectors. Education,
yes,
water, especially where you saw 40% almost.
Yes.
Lands.
Trade.
Look at lands housing, by the way.
This is interesting.
Look at lands, 43.7%. But if you ask me, what does actually government do in lands, housing, and urban development? Are they building houses for people? Do you have a house of your own?
Very interesting.
Do you know how many housing units, what do you call it, deficit we have per Ugandan? So many Ugandans who are coming up, the fastest growing population and youngest in the entire world.
Yes.
But look, even in spite of the little budget that you're giving to housing, you're also cutting it by 43%.
By 43%?
Does that make sense?
Indeed. Indeed, it does not make any sense. So, Jeff, let's take a very, very short break. Munanga mulabi, tukomawo ko katono, tovao, tukomawo n'ebirala. Okay, welcome back from that short break. You are still watching the Smart Rise Show. And of course, today in our Smart Insights, we have Mr. Jeff Wadulo, all the way from the Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, CSBAG. And we are giving a breakdown into the budget, trying to understand what the impact of such a budget is to the average Ugandan. But we always say, don't get glued to your TV. Gendo okole, choino kola kwata kwasi smartphone yo sakoka data, boboli mu taxi, osobola tulaba tuli streaming live ku Facebook, of course ne ku YouTube, kwe tuli page bagita Smart 24 TV. Once again, welcome back from that break, Jeff.
Thank you, Tush.
Now, before we went into that break, you had told me, in your opinion, that the budget is not realistic. You gave your reasons. Now, when we look at the international protocol, especially when it comes to these international consortiums like the United Nations, okay, let's start from our neighbors, the East African Community, the COMESAs, the SADC, African Union, and of course the biggest that we can talk about is the United Nations. They have put some protocols which ought to guide the budgeting processes of member countries. And for the United Nations, their protocol is in form of the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, which also has a lot of emphasis put on poverty eradication with encouragement in areas to do with health, agriculture, and education. And yet, according to our budget breakdown, these are some of the areas being cut down. So, as a civil society organization, do you think Uganda is in line with the international protocols, especially with the Sustainable Development Goals in relation to the budgeting process and the budget itself?
Not at all. I think you've seen, in terms of the breakdown, the sectors that are losing out, which would have, for example, direct impact on, say, elimination of hunger, elimination of poverty, say by 2030, water and sanitation, access to clean water. These are human development sectors, which would actually impact on the human development indicators. Those are not being financed as they should. So in terms of protocols, yes, these protocols provide a guide,
yes,
on what nations and nation states should do in order to move in tandem with the entire global development agenda.
Yes.
But many governments tend to either relax or forego investment in these key areas,
yes,
in favor of much more selfish investments like you've seen in public administration,
yes,
in security, in flagship programs, which at the end of the day sometimes end up not working.
Yes.
And then, of course, the huge toll that is brought about by corruption,
yes,
in the different sectors, especially in the works and transport sector. It's the one taking the biggest amount of money, but it's also where there's the hugest corruption.
Yes.
So, in terms of SDGs, even the budget committee report actually says we are not achieving that. Majorly, as I told you, about 10 trillion shillings.
Yes.
Off the mark for NDP2, which actually, if we achieve by NDP2, we actually achieve in terms of SDGs. But because we are not investing enough money, because we are not collecting enough taxes, we are not having the necessary impact. Even when you find places where roads have been done, the quality of life of these people, have you seen very good roads being used by ordinary citizens? You've seen where children are going to school, but they're barefooted.
Yes.
What does that tell you about the balancing of your financing? Does that tell you that even when you're giving more money to roads, you're not giving more money to education, but you're also not giving more money to agriculture for the ordinary citizen to be able to make more money to take their children to school and at least buy them
a shoe.
Like a shoe, to walk on the tarmac road.
Yes.
Did you see how that brings out the picture of the imbalance of this budget? Yeah, but most of the SDGs, by the way, are focused on improving the quality of life,
yes,
of the individual. And that's it. So if you're not investing in those social sectors, then you're not improving the quality of life. I can have a huge house,
yes, but
if I'm sleeping hungry in this huge house, does it really make a lot of sense to the sense of my livelihood? I may have very good roads, but if these roads are not enabling me to take my produce to the market, if they are not transporting me safely to where I need to get access to medical services, you know there's a whole big problem with ambulance services.
Yes.
You can see that many people die in our accidents, but even those who would have survived take so long to be rescued. By the time they reach the
Medical
hospitals,
center.
they are more or less like dead on arrival.
Yes.
Why? Because I don't know why government for a very long time has refused to invest in the ambulance system.
Yes.
I've seen MPs actually, the ones now who are through campaign machinations, are the ones who are buying ambulances. That's not a role of an MP. But because they see the gap,
Yes.
then they are forced to be able to provide it.
Yes.
But you can see that if government put some money in that referral system, a number of lives would be lost, or rather, sorry, would be saved.
Yes.
Where they would be lost on the highways, especially Masaka Road, where there are a lot of accidents, even with the police roadblocks. So I think for me,
Yes.
it's not about the amount of money. It is where you're putting it to have the most effective impact.
I like the way you've gone ahead to actually dig deep into, for example, the transport, the work and transport sector,
Right.
or industry for that matter. One, you mentioned something that I felt you didn't give enough insight on the issue of feeder roads. You talk about huge investments in good roads. The other time I was going to northern Uganda, and the road is amazing, but I was the only one on the road for more than an hour. Only one on the road for more than an hour. And yet Jaja down in Bunyaruguru has to use the same feeder road that is shared with a border a poor border rider. There is some matoke on the same road growing. There are people trading matoke there. Kids are passing the same feeder road to go to school. I mean, when we talk about the eradication of poverty and hunger in Uganda's economy, when we come out to see the finance minister make a national statement that the economy of the country is growing well, and yet soon he will be releasing a 34 trillion budget, we again ask ourselves the bigger question: how many Ugandans are making it? How many Ugandans are actually benefiting from such budgets and such investment priorities?
For example, you should agree with me, Uganda's economy, about 80% of it is informal. But if you ask yourself how much is going in investing in small and medium enterprises, most of them, by the way, that are not registered, but are holding this economy. Because it is those small chikubo traders, the banana sellers and so on, that are keeping this economy alive. We were keeping the Sudanese economy alive with the export of our food before the war broke up. And you see that it makes a lot of sense if you, for example, made sure that you strengthen the ability to do business by these small and medium enterprises. But if you ask, that's where the budget is being cut. Trade and industry.
That's still a shock for
me. So you get. But what does that also mean in terms of the ability for the economy to turn around the lives and livelihoods of the ordinary person? So if you're not putting money in sectors that would have a direct impact, for example, when you talk about the rural feeder roads, a lot of agricultural produce, especially during the rainy season, in hilly areas like where I come from in Bulambuli, the road is so bad that to hit the tarmac, I think you need travel about 20 kilometers. These are places also which are poorly connected in terms of telecom services. These are places which also do not have access to mobile money. So you find that an economy like that, which would have actually grown on a code of access to some of the basic infrastructure, is actually let down, and what you have is when you have economic growth, this kind of growth is not balanced.
Yeah.
So you find that this kind of economy is going to actually make it better for the rich to get richer.
Yes.
But for the poor to also get poorer. And what that means is that at some point there has to be a burst of the bubble for this kind of economy to get back on course.
Yes.
So that means you'll have more people who are falling into unemployment, people who are seeking jobs but can't find one, but also people who can, if they find one, earn a wage that can sustain them for a month.
Yes.
And be able also to meet the other costs like health and clothing.
Yes.
So that's the kind of economy that speaks to the ordinary citizen.
Yes.
When you ask the ordinary citizen, they ask you, where are the jobs? Where are the medicines in hospitals? Our children's quality of education has been going down.
Yes.
The other day, the president even acknowledged that UPE has actually not achieved. That was the president himself saying. He was even actually saying, if you have your child, take them to a private school. Then I was like, really? This is a government program for the last, how many years? 15?
Yes.
Yeah, so, and there are small things, by the way, that government has to do.
Yes.
One is to have the faith in its people. Put the money where it deserves.
Yes.
And the money on its own starts generating
more money.
I've seen, by the Ugandans, they're a very hardworking group of people.
Yes.
If you go downtown and you see how Ugandans are hustling, they are surviving in spite of the onslaught of the economy because of the stealing away of this money.
Yes.
And putting it in unproductive ventures.
Yes.
So, yes, we have to do things differently if we have to expect different results.
Very, very interesting. Now, before we go to the final question, we hear of words like supplementary budget, and the case of supplementary budgets in Uganda is quite interesting. Every time the budget has been passed, barely 2 quarters down the road, you hear a certain unit or ministry saying, you know what, we've used up our money, we need more money. Why does the average Ugandan keep having to pay taxes for a supplementary expense that they didn't budget for? Because this is, to me, an indication of poor fiscal discipline, poor financial discipline. As a civil society organization, why do we, what is your opinion about this?
Yeah, you just said it. Just bad manners. Poor fiscal discipline, no indiscipline.
Yes.
So that means that if a budget has had a plan, that means you are aware you're going to do A, B, C, D, and you need so much in order to get so much.
Yes.
But then you find in the middle of a financial year, or even before actually, sometimes even in the first quarter, you find a supplementary budget coming up, and to a sector that has no direct impact on the growth of the economy. Like, for example, when you get a supplementary budget for the Uganda Electoral Commission.
Okay.
What does that mean? They tell you they have a roadmap, which they launched the other day.
Yes.
And then they're asking for so much. Then you ask, but were you not aware we're going to have
elections in such a time?
In 2021. Although, of course, you could also pull them off the hook because you've had a lot of changes.
Yes.
People even were wondering whether there's going to be elections in 2021 or 2023. Even now, by the way, we may not be so sure.
There is still that speculation and uncertainty.
Yes, but supplementary budgets are a sign of poor financial management and discipline, because people tend to want to respond. I saw before this budget framework paper was approved, before it was brought to Parliament,
Yes.
I saw 2 communications. One, it was called a cabinet decision, where they were saying, before, actually it was about a few days before the budget framework paper was brought to Parliament.
Yes.
And they said, cabinet decision, this money, this money, this money, cut it off and put it here. As you saw what happened to the YLP money.
Yes.
And then I also saw another presidential communication, I think dated about 15th of December, which is a few days to the submission of the budget framework paper to Parliament by about 15th.
Yes.
What does that tell you in terms of the politics and how they impact the economy? So the onslaught and the unaffordable cost of the politics of the country is having a lot of huge impacts on how fast and robust our economy can grow.
Yes.
So we will continue for as long as there is poor governance or bad governance, politics interfering with how the economy is managed. We are yet to continue seeing a lot of supplementary budgets for things that you'll always be surprised about, but majorly because the president has said, let's do it.
Yes.
And most of these technocrats do not have the backbone, did you say?
Yes.
To say no to some of the political interferences.
Yes.
So supplementary budgets, there's even a law, the Public Finance Management Act.
Yes.
In the first version, before it was revised, was restricting supplementary budgets. They had said for it to be supplementary, it has to have about 3 factors. One, it should be financing something which is unavoidable,
Okay.
which is unforeseeable, you didn't know, you didn't see,
Yes.
and what is absorbable. Now, the nature of our supplementary requests do not...
They don't meet even one of the three.
Absorbable, unavoidable, and
unpredictable.
and unforeseeable.
Yes.
So is that indiscipline, or is that actually, what do you call it?
We need a much more technical word for that. Yes.
Yeah. So that is how our political economies are run.
And now, of course, speaking about politics or political economies, well, now we are now going to bring it a bit into politics. You see, recently, right from the iPod summit, we see different political parties coming in to engage in early political campaigns, and yet, at some point, we also know that such activities have an impact, a direct impact on the economy, especially there is a term that I once had an economist use, the political business climate. So people abandon work. This definitely affects their per capita income. There are some who specifically say, I'm closing my shop for 1 year because I want to join political party A, and every time I'll be engaged in their campaigns, I will be given a daily allowance of about maybe 10,000 or 5,000, and that becomes a day-to-day job for them. We see there are cases where the related stakeholders fail to manage the chaos that could come with politics, and as a result, businesses close. At some point, worst case scenarios, foreign direct investments and businessmen coming in from other countries are given the fright, especially when it comes to operating in such an economy. Right. So what is your take on such early political engagements, and perhaps if you had room to recommend, what would be your recommendation?
Thank you, Tush, about this. The politics of the country is a huge cost on the economy, because politics is not productive. But if you saw, there was a report done by SEDU.
Yes.
Out of was it between 3 and 4 trillion, the cost of elections in the last cycle, 2016, about 3 trillion, of which about 500 billion was to the Electoral Commission alone. But you can imagine a much bigger budget outside the mandate of the Electoral Commission through individual, I think it almost came to about an average of about 300 million for every MP campaign.
Interesting.
You see how costly. Just even the fees for nomination, I think were raised to about 2.5 million or something. In a way, making it even harder for people who should be able and more qualified to compete, but making it easier for those who are incumbent, who already have access to money to be able actually to go back to parliament.
Yes.
But you can also see that most of the MPs who get to parliament, most of them actually engage in fraudulent elections.
Yes.
Vote buying,
bribing voters. Oh, that's vote buying.
Ballot stuffing.
Yes.
Impunity, violence, and so on, and the cost that it comes with. So there is a bill actually that is being pushed by the NDI. I think that's the National Democratic Institute.
Yes.
To try and regulate the amount of money that is spent in a particular election by individuals.
Yes.
From presidential to parliamentary and so on. Because people are forced, and you see, when you spend money in politics, you're also taking money away from social services.
Yes.
So that's why it doesn't surprise you that you find a particular constituency. It has an MP, maybe for the last 3 electoral terms, but this place has no access to good roads. It has no medicine in health facilities. The school standards are poor. So what does that tell you? But you have an MP who has been there for the last 3.
And you've been putting them into
and has been putting money in the election.
Yes.
So you ask yourself, where does the impact of this money go
for the average
to
voter?
impact the ordinary voter?
Yes.
Even when they are given small monies like 500, 1,000, how does that impact their lives? Because as soon as the election is done, they're back to poverty. But more still, the money which should have actually gone to their health facilities, money which should have gone to their schools.
Yes.
Poor, you can find very poor. There's a secondary school we have in my constituency.
Yes.
If you look at it, you compare it with the chicken house, and the chicken house will be better. A secondary school, and you expect good grades from a secondary school like this. So money going to politics at the expense of the social sectors is something government needs to regulate.
Yes.
And government needs to get interested, because it is the rest to the bottom. I'll give you a scenario.
Yes.
Citizens are poor.
I'm sorry, as we wind up.
Yes, citizens are poor. Politics is putting money in elections but not impacting on their lives, and social services are being left out. So that means that if actually government put more money in social services and less in politics,
yes,
would have actually a much better game, and citizens would elect them on the basis of the quality of social services rather than on the small per unit 1,000, 2,000 shillings they get as individuals, which comes back to the same thing. After the election, government is back to the road. High debt.
Yes.
Inability to actually generate local revenue, because then they have no productive jobs to be able to pay taxes.
Yes.
It's a race to the bottom.
Indeed.
It's akin to 2 lizards that fight in the roof of a house and find themselves falling onto the ground, and one of them losing its tail, and they find and ask themselves, what were we doing? That's how I can liken the kind of economy that we are running.
I like that metaphor. And finally, as we close, we have run behind schedule. But as we close, Jeff, and first of all, I will recommend the job that such organizations as the Civil Society Budgeting Advocacy Group is doing.
Right.
So thank you so much.
Right.
What are your views? What are your final views to our viewer who could be a stakeholder and policy maker? What is your final take on the budget review? Yes,
I'm just thinking that the technocrats need to do their job for which the government pays them.
Yes.
Listen less to the politics. I would rather lose my job as a technocrat but did the right thing. other than, as I said, a race to the bottom, where everyone is doing the wrong thing. And by the way, everyone knows that the things that we're doing are wrong. But we hope somehow that there will be divine intervention to rescue this economy. But at the end of the day, of course, those who have will continue to have. And the mistakes that we make as an economy do not impact those in the politics high up in the higher echelons. It is usually the ordinary citizen that loses out. So the citizens also have to exercise their constitutional power. They should be able to elect people who are on the basis of their competences rather than the size of their pocket.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. Thank you so much for your time, Jeff. And our dear viewer, like I said, Jeff is the Parliamentary Liaison Officer oba bwe manchitadde mu lulimi olwaffe nti ye mwami akwatagana yakwasaganya kampani ye oba ekitongole kye kyakolamu n'abali mu Parliament. Ate ng'omulimu ogubateekawo gwakulaba nti abali mu Parliament tebakola zi budget nga tezikusaanye gwe ng'omuna Uganda ali mu kulaba share
omuntu wa wansi
omuntu wa bulijjo. So tusiima nnyo era tusiimidde ddala, tusiima okubeera naffe okutuwa obudde ate n'emirimu gye mukoleera
naffe okutuwa omwaganya okubeerako ku mukutu guno. Balamusizza nnyo, tweyanzizza nnyo, tweyanzike.
Yes, Sebo. Of course, our dear viewer, that was it for our Smart Insights today. And of course, it also brings us to the conclusion of our show, the Smart Try show today. Remember, like the ladies have been saying, we run every day from Monday to Friday. When I say every day, I don't mean including weekends. Every weekday, Monday to Friday, 6 to 10 a.m. and we exist to give you the most relevant information. Now, we are going to have Jen Kasumba, Ivembe, and of course, Hannah Mbago. Stay tuned for more programming here on Smart 24 TV.